Hello, let's talk about books. My name's Elizabeth and I like to talk about the books that I've been reading in 5 book chunks because that makes it a shorter video for everyone involved. I've got the air conditioner going because it is 37 degrees today and it's a wee bit warm. I'm seeing like the breeze is coming right on here. It is so delicious. So I'm sorry if you get breeze noises, but I'm not actually sorry because otherwise you'll be graced with my sweat moustache, which I know is attractive, but this is not the channel for that type of thing. Let's stop waffling, start talking about books. First up, I listened to Middlemarch by George Eliot. This is a gorgeous cover, isn't it? Vintage Classics edition, because I love my vintage classics. But I actually listened to, I think, the Penguin edition. The details will be below. This was a buddy read with a friend of mine. First read for both of us, and we both loved it. We were blown away by how spectacular Middlemarch is. Now, I came into it with high expectations because one of my English professors declared to me that it is the best novel written in the English language. And I mean, I haven't read that many novels in the English language, so I can't say for sure, but it was amazing. Definitely something that you could really sink your teeth into and dedicate your entire career to studying. Middlemarch is the story of three main people. There's Dorothea, who's young and idealistic. She's got her religious convictions and she gets married really early on in the story and in her life based on these religious convictions, and then it turns out that what she was hoping for didn't turn out the way, like things didn't turn out the way that she was hoping. There's the story of Frank, who expects to come into an inheritance and doesn't turn out the way that he expected, and so he has to muddle along with what he's given. And then there's the story of the doctor, Lydgate, who he's new in town, he buys a medical practice, there's a marriage there as well, and then things don't turn out the way that you expected. And that's the crux of the book. It's centered on the lives of lots of people who live in the area of Middlemarch, and it's about life, and life doesn't always turn out the way that you hope that it will, the way that you expect that it will, but that doesn't mean that it turns out badly. Ultimately, in the end, it's about the small achievements of a life that might not have an impact on the world, but have an impact on the person and their community. I loved it and I really wish I could study it properly, read around it, just sink my teeth in a bit more. It was definitely a fun time. And the audiobook, I highly recommend. It was fantastic. Middlemarch was first published as 4 books. This is broken up into 8 books, 8 distinct books, and they were published as 4 books over 1871 and 1872. Next up was The Dance Tree by Kiren Millwood Hargrave. This was published in 2022. I really enjoyed The Mercy, so this was an Insta buy once I saw that it had come out. This is the story of 3 women. The first one is, and the POV character is Lisbeth. She's pregnant and she's been pregnant a lot. She has had 12 miscarriages in 5 or 6 years. And this time she's heavily pregnant. She's 7 months when the book begins. And so it's a book about dread and hope of pregnancy. And that is heavily features. And I tell you what, if you've ever been pregnant in the heat of summer, like I was feeling this. I was feeling it. Does talk a lot in depth about pregnancy loss, so if that's not for you, skip it. But it's the story of Lisbeth. It is the story of Lisbeth's bestie, Ida, and Lisbeth's sister-in-law, Nethe, and they're all intertwined. It's a historical fiction. It's set in Strasbourg in the 16th century, I think. 1518. At the time of a dance plague, which is a real thing that happened, women in particular were overtaken by this need to keep moving their bodies to the point of death. At the beginning of the story, Elizabeth's husband is summoned away conveniently to another city. Netha, who is Elizabeth's sister-in-law and her husband's sister, comes back from exile. She's been exiled for 7 years. So these two women haven't met before. And then Ida knew Netha before she left. Or Nete, I think they pronounce it Neta in the audiobook. And so Ida knew Neta before she left, and then she's friends with Lisbeth now. And so all these women are intertwined. The men are either absent or ridiculously evil. Like the bad guy. Why? I was really pissed off with him because why is he bad? He's vengeful and vindictive and a bully, and turns out he does some awful, awful things. But there's literally no reason given for why he's this way. Why is he a bully? Why is he such a horrible, horrible person? I guess somebody has to be the bad guy in the story, and it doesn't surprise me that it's a man. And I say that based on The Mercies as well, which was another story centered on a community of women without men, and men coming in and trying to overrule them. But there was literally no reason given to us as the audience for him to be so evil. So that was really frustrating to me. The women were fine. The story was fine. It progressed along. The absent husband comes back eventually, and it's about these women trying to save their lives, trying to save their friendship, their livelihoods, their homes at the time of the dance plague, but there's also a drought, and they're farmers. So there's that struggle as well. Plus then Lisbeth just trying to hold on to this baby and cope. The dance tree reference is a particular sacred place that they have, sacred in a pagan religion way historically, but also sacred to them as a safe space in the book. Did I like it? Yeah. It was alright. It was fine. Probably wouldn't read it again. Next was Flights, which I was kind of hoping would be my book of the year, by Olga Tokarczuk, potentially. This book won the Man Booker International Prize in 2018 because it's translated from Polish, and this was weird. And it has reaffirmed to me that Booker Prize judges will give prizes or nominations to books they don't understand but feel like they should understand, and because they feel like they should have understood the book, it must be clever and worth an award. Having said that, she writes beautifully. The translation is obviously beautiful too. Translated by, I should tell you that, Jennifer Croft. Was originally published in Polish in 2007, the translation 2017. The author herself describes it as a constellation novel. Feels like somebody's published her blog. Some stuff is fiction, it follows a narrative, it's interesting, it's magical realism. Some of it's like a travel log, some of it fictional, some of it feels autobiographical, and some of it's retelling of historical events. It's got the themes of travel, but also bodies. A lot of the themes are about like not embalming, but preservation of bodies and organs. I think you really have to reach to get it to make sense as a cohesive whole. This was a buddy read for me, and one of the comments that I put, even though my buddy hasn't started reading it yet, one of the comments I put was like, some of this should have just stayed on the blog. Some of it is just like a one-line entry in a section. But then, a story happens about halfway through, which makes it kind of tie together, and it was much easier to read in the second half with that context behind me. But until I got there, I felt like I was flailing, enjoying each of the stories, but not seeing how they connected to each other. And that was really disconcerting. I don't know that I enjoyed it as a whole, but I enjoyed parts of it. And because some of the sections were so short, I just highlighted the whole thing because they just really rocked me. There's one, it's like this half a page. It's called Ruth. After his wife died, he made a list of all the places that had the same name as her, Ruth. He found quite a few of them, not only towns, but also streams, little settlements, hills, even an island. He said he was doing it for her sake, and besides, it gave him strength to see that in some indefinable way she still existed in the world, even if only in name. And that furthermore, whenever he would stand at the foot of a hill called Ruth, he would get the sense that she hadn't died at all, that she was right there, just differently. Her life insurance was able to cover the costs of his travels. Like I just felt like that's grotesque that he's traveling the world to see these places to evoke the memory of his dead wife, but then the grim and stark reality that he can only do this because she died, because her life insurance has paid for it. I hate it. I love it and I hate it at the same time. That's how I felt about a lot of this book. So no, it is not in my top books of the year. I'm so glad that I have read it. It is a weird thing that I am constantly thinking about, and maybe that's why I won the Booker. Very likely. I'm not a Booker Prize judge. The next one is one that I've been meaning to read for so long, and then it formed part of the Dewey Decimal Challenge I've been doing that's hosted by Kelly at Curatorially Yours. The book is This Is the Noise That Keeps Me Awake. It's by Garbage and Jason Cohen. Garbage is a band and happens to be my favourite band. This came out in 2017 and it fulfills the 700 category because music biographies and autobiographies come under 782.421. This is a big coffee table book, lots of pictures, and it's the story of Garbage from their telling of how they formed, the creating of their albums. They had a break from 2005, 2012. And so as a fan, I knew a lot of this already, but some of it was new. All of it was interesting. And this came out in 2017. So they've had an album come out since this book was released. It's interesting because being like a super fan and knowing everything about like a band or a celebrity or being part of a fandom is not my vibe. I find it really cringe. And so I did learn some things from here. It is definitely a sanitized version of a rock band career. It has to be. Definitely written in the hindsight of shit things happened and we got through it and we're all okay now. And reminiscing on the good times. So, I mean, it's not like a dirty expose or anything. It's just interesting to have. And since I pre-ordered it as soon as I heard about it, and then I hadn't read it yet 6 years later, I'm glad to have done it. Glad to have done it. Plus it ticks off that 700 category for the challenge and I've only got one more to read. And then finally, because I was feeling crummy, I went back to a comfort read, which was a reread of One Corpse Too Many by Ellis Peters. This is the second in the Brother Cadfael series. Cadfael is a monk, medieval monk in England who often, I wouldn't say shirks his religious duties, but definitely puts them on hold in order to investigate sketchy things that have happened. And this one, which is right at the top of the series and really focuses the battle between Stephen and Maud for England. This is set in the 12th century, I think, 1138. So there's civil war over who's going to rule England, and King Stephen has come to take the town of Shrewsbury, where Cadfael lives in the abbey there. Stephen takes the town and executes the enemy that was holding the castle there. So 94 people are executed in the castle, but when the monks go to recover the bodies and give them a Christian burial, they find an extra corpse, one corpse too many, and so they have to solve the murder of who this person is, why did they die. Ends up with, as happens in most of these, there's a romance and a happily ever after, or maybe a happily for now. Cadfael, I mean, sometimes he has to do penance for shirking his duties because he's off solving the crime, but in this one, no. And it's just a comforting time, and I enjoyed it. This is a classic. It was published in 1979. My copy used to belong to Jane Perry and came from Pre-Read Books in Moonta. I don't know where that is because I picked it up in a library sale. And that is 5 books that I have been reading recently. Definitely devolved from stuff that I really had to think about and concentrate, Middlemarch and Flights, down to the comfort read of Ellis Peters, just because I needed it. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.